awards.
I know it's quite cold in here with the air conditioning on.
Everything's cold.
But how are you doing? How has
Good.
MEGACON been treating you?
Yeah,
Has it
very
been
good, very
fun?
good. Met some lovely people. Yeah, it's been fun.
Love that. Well, I'm going to kick things off with quite a few questions for you about your career, and I want to go all the way back to the beginning. When was the moment that you realized you wanted to become an actor?
I'm not entirely sure. I do know that, I don't know whether the faces that I would make in the mirror started before I saw Meryl Streep in Out of Africa or after. But there was certainly a point where I realized that that's what I wanted to do, and I felt like there was something inside me that might be able to do it. I auditioned for community theater and this, that, and the other, and had some success and a lot of no success. And so, but I think it started probably in my early teens, maybe.
I love that, early on. And I love theater, and I love that you still do theater. I know you're getting ready to do a production of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which is fantastic. What has that kind of been like for you, getting to continue to revisit the stage and continue to hone that craft?
I've got friends who do theater all the time, and they're very much theater animals. And it really feels like something that it costs quite a lot. It feels like it, and I have a tendency to choose projects and roles that kind of give their everything during the course of the play, and so I generally only do theater every 3 or 4 years, and so I'm about to do Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf in the UK, where I live, and the last one that I did probably was 3 or 4 years ago. So there's a certain point where the itch starts, and I feel like it's about time to start thinking about what to do next. But any sooner than that would feel too much to me, I think. But it's a really nice balance, I really appreciate having that balance between TV and film and theater, and I feel like that's existed for actors in the UK for a very long time. For many years, someone like Judi Dench, for instance, would be able to easily move between film and TV and stage in a way that in the States, that TV bit for a long time was really looked down upon by the film industry, and certainly by actors in the industry, and doing TV was kind of like a lower grade thing that some people did. But that's really changed over the last few years. And anyway, so I think part of moving to the UK was also having aside from the fact that I was always going to, and I grew up there, but was knowing that all three were embraced in a way that they weren't in the other part of my life, which was America, and wanting to fully give myself over to that.
So many British actors have that base of theater as their understanding of the performance, and I'm curious to know, what kind of actor are you when it comes to breaking down characters, how you approach things? Is it different between TV and theater?
Gosh, I don't. I think I probably have the same process with everything. There are some. Although there are some projects that I start much earlier on. If there's a lot of, if it's something that is high pressure, or that there's a huge amount of dialogue, or a complexity, say like they were the Prime Minister of the UK for almost a decade, I started a lot earlier on preparing for Margaret Thatcher than I would necessarily do on other things. And so it all depends. There are some things that I sign up to do where it feels like to hold it lighter or to go in thinking that I know less might be more beneficial to how I play that character. And then there's sometimes where I feel like my system knows. Like there was something interesting recently that I did for Channel 4 in the UK. It was based on a novel called Trespasses, and it was about the Troubles in Northern Ireland. And before the book came out, I had read it, and a friend of mine was the publisher of the book, and I met the writer, and over dinner she had asked if I would play the mother in the book, and I said yes. I said, look, if it all comes together at the right time and I can fit it into my schedule, I'd be honored to be a part of that. And it did, but because I had fallen in love with the character in its novel form and was such an admirer of the book and of her writing, I felt like the character already existed, or an idea of the character already was embedded into my psyche. And so when I then was going to play her, I felt like I was almost chipping away at a pre-existing thing in my head. It wasn't like I was creating it out there. It felt like she was already inside, and I was just trying to figure out what the bits of almost like she was, yeah. I don't know what to say. But yeah, it felt like a different way of approaching it somehow, that I was trying to figure out something that already existed as opposed to creating something that didn't exist yet.
Almost like a symbiotic relationship with the character, that it's
yeah.
Like the feedback loop almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that. Well, I'm also curious to know, like, how do you choose what kind of roles you go after? Because there are so many incredible badass women that you've played throughout your career, and very nuanced and very complex. And I think that's very admirable.
Well, I don't feel like I choose characters because they're badass necessarily. I feel like I get approached very often like people approach me when they're looking to cast a badass character because I play badass characters. But I feel like one of the things that has been interesting for me is actually to do the opposite. As an actor, to say yes to things that aren't so obvious, that one wouldn't necessarily automatically say, yeah, I would understand why she'd be cast in that, because even a character who is not necessarily that intense or that, let's say high up in the food chain, or that controlled or has everything figured out. It's actually more fun sometimes to explore the characters who don't have it figured out and are trying to find their way. There's a lot of richness and complexity there in that journey, and also, characters that make mistakes like the rest of us humans do. And I think that was one thing that was important for me in sex education. I feel like Jean Milburn was a character that I played who was a sex therapist and had great relationship with her son, but slightly problematic at the same time. She did things as a parent that I might not necessarily choose to do myself. I've actually become more like her since I played her, which is also problematic. But anyway, but she, at the very beginning, I feel like there was something about jumping into her, and it was so much fun, and I was kind of giddy with it, and I feel like she almost was, there was almost something too good to be true about her, in a sense, and how she, even in her quirkiness or whatever, there was something, so it was really, you know, when I look back at her and her great clothes and her great hair and her great, you know, her slips and her self-confidence, by the time we got to the, whatever it was, third or fourth season, I thought, you know what, there are other things about women, the complexity of women, I feel like I want her to represent in a way that I don't feel was necessarily showing up in the first couple seasons. And so then when, you know, it was important for me that we observe her going through, you know, her menopause or perimenopause in a way that felt more messy and realistic and wasn't necessarily as perfect as you might imagine, given how she showed up in the first couple of seasons. So that was fun too. Then you know, allowing her to really fall apart and be messy and imperfect and really struggling. So.
And that was a beautiful art to get to watch as an audience, and I think that's what's really beautiful about art is there's a bit of a give and take, and you learn through it, and that's something I feel very strongly about is the fact that every experience that we have, we take something away from it as individuals. Can you look back at any of the roles you've had either on screen or on stage that after that process you were like, that changed something within me, I now understand something better about myself or about the world around me?
Well, I almost feel like with everything there's something, that there's a bit of take as well as all the give, and you know, I certainly realized that early on with Scully. There were so many aspects of her character that were not aspects of me that I feel like she really did me a good service, because even though I was much wilder than her, and she felt on the one hand quite square, you know, she was really a decent human being, and you know, her whole modus operandi was kind of being of service. It was being of service as a medical doctor and being of service as a scientist, and so I think that really rubbed off on me. And certainly, you know, there was a lot that I learned, I think, from Stella Gibson when I worked on The Fall. And you know, and a lot of that was about my own sense of self and sexuality and sensuality, and you know, allowing myself to embrace that and not hide from it, because she certainly didn't. And so that I felt like I learned a lot from her for that. And then there's this film that I just did that I can't wait for people to see. Jane Schoenbrunn directed a film called I Saw the TV Glow, that their latest is Teenage Love and Sex and Camp Miasma, with Hannah Einbinder, and that's coming out in August, and it's crazy, man. I saw it, it is nuts, and it's so much fun, and I have a feeling con audiences will definitely appreciate that one. But I really enjoyed the character that I played, she was fun.
My coworkers were extremely excited for that one. As soon as I told them I was talking with you, they're like, ask her about it, ask her about it.
Yeah,
so
it's pretty special. Yeah.
Is that your first slasher-esque film?
It is, which is odd, because you'd think I would have done one for. I I tried for a while. There was a while when I was working with, oh my God, what do they call it? There's a big production, Jason Blum. Yeah, there was a while where we were in conversation over a few years to try and create something together. And then we didn't. So the desire has been there. Yeah.
Was it everything you dreamed of to get to be part of a slasher?
This is so much more than a slasher.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, this is like a slasher within a slasher within a slasher. And so to be a part of like an uber meta slasher, a slasher is pretty awesome.
It's like you've peaked. That is the height.
Yes.
You've gone as high as you can go.
I can do another slasher after this because they will all fall short.
That's true. And I did want to go back to X-Files because X-Files came so early on in your career. What do you remember about that audition process and everything kind of leading up to beginning shooting on it?
Well, and forgive me if there are people in the audience who've heard this before, because it's true. But I came from absolutely nothing and nowhere, and I was 24, and I wasn't really in the habit of auditioning for TV. I wasn't, I was kind of elitist and had high hopes for an Oscar and all that kind of stuff, and so I wasn't really auditioning for TV. And then this script came. My manager at the time said, "But you've really got to take a look at this one." And I could tell the minute that I read it that it was special. And I remember the color of my pajamas that I wore and the color of the wall of the room that I was sitting in when I read the script. But I also didn't, because I wasn't used to auditioning for TV. I didn't know what the process was. I didn't realize the process when you, at least in the old days, when you would go and audition for TV, is you would do something. You would do a normal audition for like the casting director, and then if they thought that the producers would like you, and they would call you back, and you go on tape, and then if the producers saw the tape and did like you, then they'd call you back to come in the room and do an audition in the room with them. And then if they still wanted you to come back again, you would come back and do it at this thing called Network, which was you would go to, in this instance it was Fox. And so you drive into the Fox studio and go into this building, and they basically owned you for the day that you went to Network. So you weren't allowed to, you were told when to show up, and you couldn't leave until they told you to leave, and you would basically sit, in this case it was a hallway, with all the other actresses who were up for Scully. And I can't remember how many of us there were, but it had been whittled down to maybe, I'm going to get this wrong, but maybe like 10 of us or whatever. And then there were also actors who they had whittled it down to for Mulder, and I think there were maybe 5. And so that first day, which took all day, and you'd go in and you'd read with one of the Mulders, and then you'd come out and you'd sit in the hallway, and then you might go in and read with another Mulder, and then you'd sit in the hallway. And in between, people would kind of talk to each other, or you'd kind of side-eye people, and try and get a sense of how confident they were feeling about the audition that they just did behind the door in front. And behind that door, and the room would probably be about half the size of this stage, I feel like, was filled with all the executives from Fox. And so you'd literally stand in front of 20 execs and do a scene. And then they'd say, "Thank you very much," and you'd go and sit out in the hallway with the other actors who were desperate to be hired. And it's a really weird, unfortunate process that hopefully doesn't exist anymore. But back then, so I went on this first day, and apparently that was the day when they were choosing the Mulder. And so I spent the whole day there in auditions with all the Mulders, and apparently they had made a decision of who the Mulder was. And then I was also told that I was invited back to audition with that molder. But they were going to bring in some more potential Scullys. So, but that's like, really? Okay. So then I showed up on the next, and I remember it was a Thursday. I showed up and they had flown in some other Scullys from New York, and they were actresses that I had known in the period of time. I only lived in New York for a year and a half or 2 years, and did the rounds of auditioning for theater, and so I would run into, it was Jill Hennessy who ended up doing Law and Order, and it was Cynthia Nixon, right? Can you imagine, right? And there was somebody else. There was somebody else who then went on to big fame. Anyway, so they had shipped in all these other actresses, which was great for my confidence. And we did that whole day again. And at the end of that day, I was told that I got the part. And so that was a Thursday, and I flew up to Vancouver on Saturday to start shooting the pilot, and that was that. Like, they had left it that late. And then we shot the pilot over like 3 or 4 weeks, I think, and that was the beginning of the beginning.
That's incredible. And what a great place to shoot in. Vancouver is just one of the most beautiful areas.
Yes. And also the other part of it is that I received my last unemployment check that same week. I mean, literally. And I had been sleeping on a friend's sofa. So I'd say I was grateful.
Very much so. And then jumping ahead to the end of X-Files for you, what were some of the conscious choices you made in looking for your next roles to ensure you didn't end up typecast into Scully type roles?
Well, I knew that I wanted to take a bit of a break. We stopped shooting in 2002, and I think it was April was the end of season 9. And then I went traveling in Africa for a couple months, did some safaris and sorted my head out a little bit. And then I had made the decision before leaving for Africa that I was going to do a play, that the thing that I wanted to do, because I hadn't been able to do one since I had lived in that short period of time in New York, and that I wanted to do a play in London. And so I found a play to do, and I traveled in Africa, and then I landed in London, and I started rehearsing for the first play that I did there.
Is that where the doing theater after a little while kind of to refresh came into practice for you?
I think so. I mean, on the one hand, like with most things, I was incredibly naive. And, the theater that I had done before, I mean, I had done a theater off Broadway in New York, and I played a tiny character. Not tiny, but I played a tertiary character, and I had come into that kind of unexpectedly because somebody had dropped out, but I had learned a lot. I was very young, and I knew, and for some reason, and that was, I think, the last play that I had done, or original piece of theater. And this first thing that I did in London was a two-hander in West End in London, and it wasn't until I was in rehearsal that I was like, oh my God, what am I thinking? Like, I haven't done theater in over a decade, maybe 15 years, and this is a big deal to do a two-hander in West End in the UK, and so that's what I have a tendency to do, is to jump in with both feet and then go, what the fuck am I doing?
It's working well for you, I have to say.
Yes.
I know know you've talked a little bit about Ryan Coogler's X-Files, like over the years, and as it's been, you know, kind of rumored, and now it seems like it's happening. What is it like for you to think about a new generation of X-Files fans, and then that kind of will lead people back to the original as well? And what has that kind of process been like? Because it's interesting, I feel like, for an actor to think it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I said, and I was in Washington at a con last weekend, and I told the crowd on the panel that I'd read the script, and that it was really good, and to not think disparagingly about it, that it's very different and very similar all at the same time. And it's very special. And I think he's incredibly talented, and I think he's one of the only people who'd really be able to do something unique and do it justice. And he's completely obsessed with the series, and I think he's one of the most talented filmmakers who's out there. So the fact that that Chris has him as the person who's going to be involved in the franchise is awesome and a huge gift, and I think that you guys will see what he has in mind, and I don't think he'll be disappointed. That's great.
Such an amazing filmmaker. I'm very excited to see Are we ready for a few fan questions? We have about 10 minutes left of the panel. There are microphones here and here. And we will start over here first. What's your name and what's your question?
Hi, my name's Liz. I actually have a question about your time on Hannibal. I wanted to know if you had any personal, creative input for your character Bedelia and your time on that show, if you enjoyed it.
No. But that's not because Brian wouldn't have been open. He would have been very open to it, and but I think partly because it was a character that I really kind of came in and out of. I knew that he had bigger fish to fry and things to think about than whatever whims I might have. But what he was very excited about was putting me in situations that were extreme and were surprising for the audience, and so I don't feel like I was ever disappointed or that he was selling me short somehow in what the kind of stuff that he had been doing.
Thank you so much.
Great question. Back over here now. What's your name and what's your question?
Hi, my name's Arena. I have a question. You mentioned earlier about making more expensive roles energy-wise, like with theater, or putting yourself in more extreme situations or characters that you fundamentally disagree with on a human level. When you unpack from those roles and you're looking for another thing to do, or you have to play that character again, how do you decompress and how do you ground yourself?
I learned very early on in my career how to compartmentalize, and I think part of that was having a kid very young and while at the same time shooting a #1 TV show, and having to compartmentalize between being a mom in the trailer and then being a character with pages and pages of lines in the stage right next door, and going back and forth in between, and having to switch off and just entirely focus. And so there is something, I have a switch, and so on the one hand I feel like it was it's a gift, but it was out of necessity in a sense. But I don't generally take characters home with me. They don't generally stay with me necessarily beyond when I leave set. And I think maybe one of the only ones that ever has was Blanche. And so what I learned to do with Blanche was, sometimes in the middle of performances, literally focus on the fact that it was me there in that moment, that these are my feet, these are my feet in these shoes, this is, and sometimes that really is, I find all that it takes is just remembering, as an actor, the difference, the separation between those two things, the character that I'm playing and but recently too, I've been doing box breathing, which is really easy to do in any situation, and I find it easier than some of the other breathing techniques, but breathing in for 4, holding for 4, breathing out for 4, holding for 4, and then, there's something that's very, meditative, obviously, but also it's something so simple about it, and it's easy to hang on to, even if your mind gets distracted or whatever, to keep coming back to it. So just stuff like that. and I don't do well with a lot of people and noise. I'm really, I have an issue with noise. And so it's really, really important for me to have quiet, like real quiet, with no humming and like machines humming and etc. around. And when I'm able to find that space, and it's hard sometimes on sets to be able to find. A lot of sets, especially these days, are really, really noisy on so many different levels. I have found that I need to do whatever it takes to remove myself and have proper quiet in between. That's what I do.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
Great question. Back over here. What's your name? What's your question?
Hello, my name is Lucia, and I am a small filmmaker. I've been passionate about film basically my whole life, and the sets that I do are low budget, so I end up writing them, and I do a lot of directing. So my question for you is, as an actor, what's something that a director can do for you that you really appreciate on set, whether it's something that makes you, confident in them, or puts you at ease, or just something that you really appreciate while you're on set?
I find that it feels quite rare these days to work with a director who is able to focus on what they need from the actor in the scene, as well as what they need the shot to look like, or what is projected through the lens, and it's actually not that easy a thing for many directors to do. I think many directors kind of forget how important that aspect of directing is. That some actors actually like to be guided, or if nothing else, trusting that a director has their eye over what the scene is about and where it sits in the whole of the piece, so that you are getting from the performers what you need to get, which is, even if you've got good actors working for you who might have done that work themselves, there are some little details that could be left out, or little details that if you're paying attention as a director, you might want to enhance the scene with bringing in. And so having that kind of a relationship with the actors, I think is in and of itself quite unique these days, and a nice thing to feel like a director has your back, or has the scene's back, but your back too. And so that's what I would say.
Thank you so much.
It's a very thoughtful question. We're going back over here now. What's your name? What's your question?
Hi, my name's Dan. I've never done any real acting outside of some extra work, but I am a musician, and I feel like there's a lot of similarity in the sort of preparation and environment of doing music in like the studio versus doing a live performance. And I think there's a lot of sort of similarities there with the acting environment of doing like a television show versus a play. And I'm wondering, there's this time when you have all this prep work you can do, and they sort of put out what is hopefully a near perfect product, versus the immediacy, the live action, the possibility of failures of the play environment. And I'm wondering if you could just speak briefly on like your preferences, the difference in preparation, and like the veil between you and the audience, that thicker versus much thinner connection versus live audience versus putting something out that comes out months later.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about, you know, in acting for TV or film, you know, you have the illusion of having a sense of control in a sense. I mean, it depends on your relationship with the director, and ultimately, I guess, then the impact that a studio may or may not have in their notes of how something is cut together. But you know, you think when you say, can I have one more take, or can I do it one more time, or whatever, that will then impact. If you feel good about the final take, to think you're done with the scene, that will have an impact on which take they choose to use in the final cut. And you know, it wasn't until, I think it was when I was working on a film called House of Mirth, and I was working with Terrence Davies, and it was the first time I'd already done, I don't know, 4 seasons of The X-Files, and it was the first time that it occurred to me that I actually don't have that control. I think, you know, that they could choose, you know, to take from the very first take that you've done, and they could choose material from that, and you'd have no say over it, because, you know, and so it's an illusion of control, and part of the joy and the terror of doing live production is that, you know, that sense of control that you have is so malleable and elusive, and can shift and change at any given point based on, you know, whether suddenly your mind goes blank and you can't remember the next line, or something can happen on stage that completely throws the day's performance because somebody else could drop a whole chunk of dialogue, or something could smash on the stage, and how does every character deal with that in the live moment? And part of the joy of doing it is exactly that fact, the fact that can change every single night, and therefore the performance that the audience is getting to watch is a minute by minute wild ride, and that anything can happen and anything can go wrong, and in that relationship between the predictable and the unpredictable, I guess, is why people, you know, love live theater so much, is because if the actors on stage are awake to that and can flow with it and change with it as it goes, no matter what happens, then it can be exhilarating to witness, I think, for an audience.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Great question. Back over here, what's your name, what's your question?
Hi Gillian, I'm Cameron. I'm a LEGO ambassador, and I loved watching you in Sex Education and X-Files. Thank you for pushing so hard for the LEGO set to happen, the official one. And my question is, now that the official X-Files LEGO set is going into planning and production, and they've settled on the design, are there any other scenes or moments from the show you wish would become future LEGO sets? Maybe I can pass it along.
I've seen what the Lego set is going to look like, and I'm very excited about it for all humankind. And gosh, what would be a good? Gosh, that's a good question. Has it been revealed, like, publicly what the Lego set looks like?
So not the official design, but we have the fan design. It's been published what he designed, Brett Waller, so we're working on it, they're working on it.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it kind of contains a lot of what you would imagine it should and would contain. And I'm trying to think of any other scenario that would be good without giving too much away. I'm just gonna say no. I think they've done a great job. And I think they've done a great job. But maybe in the future they can make a bigger version of it.
Absolutely.
like a bigger version of exactly what they've made.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Is that the first time you've been Legoized?
You know, I was wondering that myself, and I don't know. Somebody gave me one of the best gifts I've ever received at a Comic-Con. Actually, somebody had made, it was a plexiglass rectangular box, and inside were maybe 6 or 8 of the characters that I played that they had created, and so there was Blanche in a pink dress from the play, and then there was Bedelia, and there was Stella Gibson, and there was, it was, and Scully, obviously. I think it was pre-Thatcher, but it was really, really special.
So cool.
Yeah, no, really cool.
The creativity of fans, it's great.
Yeah.
We have time for about one more question, maybe two. Thank you for your question. Over here now, what's your name?
I'm Jason. Thanks for talking to us today. My question is about American Gods.
Yes.
Did you guys have any idea what you were making? Because I still don't know what I watched.
No. I'm sure Brian did to a degree. I mean, I think he's got such an incredible brain. I mean, so again, a situation where living in the UK, flying in to shoot this series, and only really having a couple days to shoot something. And one of my, so I think there was a season where I think I was simultaneously, was that right? Was this in the middle of that season? I think I was simultaneously shooting The Fall and Crisis, and there was one other blonde I was playing. I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was, no, I can't remember if it was American. But there was one time when I come in and I literally had a day to shoot, and I was coming in to do David Bowie as Medea, and I only had a few hours, and obviously hair and makeup was going to take a long time, and we knew that, and they didn't have any practice time, so they were basically doing it on me, the same morning that I was going to get to do my scenes, and the scene that it was in the back of a limo that was also kind of a spaceship.
Yeah.
And I was in Bowie's blue suit, and get to set, and it's inside of a white limo that extends like a telescope, and the camera is all the way on one end, like really, really far away, and then starts coming closer and closer, but the entire inside of the limo also contracts at the same time, and they had to, so that no light came in, they literally had to seal me in to this thing. And the whole inside was white, and the seat was white leather, and I was wearing the blue suit, and the co-star, the other actor that I was talking to, was like way over there, was like as far as that lady is sitting next to the camera, and then would have to, I think, move as the camera moved closer and closer to it, and I couldn't hear a thing that he was saying. And we only had this short period of time to shoot the scene, and in between takes, I was sitting on top of a fan because there was nowhere to hide the fan, and they couldn't open the door every time. So in between takes, I would pull the fan out of my butt and cool myself down, and then sit back on top of it, and then do the scene again to nobody because I couldn't hear the lines. And so it was basically having to just do the lines to myself and not have any feedback from the other actor. That's what it was like to shoot on American Gods. That was my experience, but it was, I got to play David Bowie and Marilyn Monroe and a few others, I forget.
That was a great recall. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was fantastic. I think it's fantastic that you're out this panel. This is so great. Thank you so much. If you did get to ask your question, are you heading back to your table now? Yes.
I am.
So you can ask
Heading
your
back to the
questions at
table.
the table, and let's put our hands together one more time for Gillian Anderson.